So happy Friday. Welcome to History Lunch Break from Greensboro History Museum. I'm Glenn Perkins. Greensboro is a fantastic college town, and every October we bring in alumni from all over for homecoming celebrations. And no homecoming celebration is bigger or more renowned than the North Carolina A&T State University's greatest homecoming on earth, with its parades and its parties and its fellowship, and of course, football. And these events usually draw more than 100,000 people. But this year, because of the pandemic, things are largely canceled. So it's kind of a hard time for us, for folks who are used to that moment of fellowship and collectivity and celebration of traditions. So we wanted to take a moment here on History Lunch Break to talk about some of those traditions and kind of make a space where folks can share and ask questions. So if you're joining us on Zoom and have a question about homecoming history or traditions, or maybe a homecoming memory or story you'd like to share, just pop it in the chat or the Q&A box there, and we'll include it as part of the show. Let me say that I'm thrilled to have as my guest today an amazing source of A&T history, James Stewart Jr. from the University Archives in FD Bluford Library. So welcome, James.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm glad to be here. And I'm happy to share a wealth of information about homecoming. And a lot of it we did not know until the past few years when we were asked to do some deep research into the origins of some of our homecoming traditions. And everyone, I'm glad to talk with you today and answer your questions.
Yeah, so you're really responsible for so much of the university's history there in the archives. And also, as I know, as a history person, a history professional, we find out stuff when people come and ask us stuff. So, I'm sure you're always learning about these things like homecoming and some of the other university traditions when people say, James, I need to know this.
That's right. Everybody who loves A&T can be an Aggie historian. And it's true, even some of our undergraduate students make discoveries and find out things we did not know for 70 or even 80 years. So I encourage everyone, if you have a question burning about A&T history, we're here to help you find the answer to it, and you may be responsible for helping to save a forgotten part of A&T history.
Yeah, so I love that advice, that we all contribute to this, to what we know about our city and our communities and our campuses and the things that matter to us. So let's just dive right in and start talking about the homecoming celebrations. Or what do we know when the earliest homecoming celebration was?
That is an ongoing unsolved mystery, although we may have solved it. The traditional year for the first homecoming at A&T has been 1926, and I'm going to share my screen for everyone. Very recently, University Relations and the Alumni Office asked myself and Mr. Edward Lee Love, archive specialist in the Bluford Library, to go back through the records and see if we can confirm if there had ever been a homecoming canceled before for any reason. And in going back through the history, we came across a newspaper clipping from 1925. And I'm gonna make this a little bit larger so everybody can see it. Okay. This is an old virtual display we created for the library. So this is a clipping from the Norfolk Journal and Guide, historically Black newspaper in Norfolk, Virginia. And A&T had a strong relationship with this paper, and it has automatic flip. So this is the only record we have of this, but this is our A&T 1925 football schedule. And it says that there is a game scheduled for St. Paul Tigers at Greensboro, November 7, 1925, and it clearly says homecoming. So with this clipping, there is some evidence that homecoming started a little bit earlier than we thought. And then an alumni of A&T gave an interview in the 90s saying there was a 1924 homecoming, but we still haven't been able to confirm it. An irony about all this is, even though 1926 was supposed to be the first homecoming, we can't find any evidence of a 1926 homecoming. But we know there was a big one in 1927. We were the CIAA championship football team. We were undefeated that entire season, and our homecoming game, we won 20-0 against the Lincoln University Lions. So as time goes on, we're able to confirm more and more about the early history of A&T's homecoming. But so far, 1925 seems to have been the very first homecoming.
And so it really was linked to the football team, right? And this kind of fall celebration that was starting to be a tradition on a lot of campuses in the 20s. Now, so the NCAA football team, I mean, that's a huge tradition in and of itself, right?
Yes.
When did the football team actually get started?
From our histories, the football team started around 1901, and it's hard to believe today, but maybe for the first 20 years, our football team didn't have the greatest reputation. Uh, there are articles about how we would lose 0 against Bennett College. Bennett was co-ed then, and we did not have the best reputation until about 1924. What began to happen in the early 20s was our football coach was an alumni of the college named Lonnie P. Byram. And LP Byram was a World War I veteran, and he also coached baseball and football at A&T. But I believe I read an article that said in the summer of 24, he went to a football coaches training seminar at Penn State. So he was trained and got a lot of teaching from the best football coaches in the country. And when he came back to A&T, we won our old championship for the first time. We were formerly in a championship called the NCAC. I think it was the North Carolina Athletics Conference of several HBCUs and preparatory schools that would play against each other. In December of 24, we joined the CIAA, the Color Intercollegiate Athletic Association, later the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association. And we were in that conference till 1970 when we became a MEAC school. But when we joined the CIAA, we began to grow in prominence. And it's possible that the motivation for homecoming was being a part of that conference. We were playing against Tuskegee University, Lincoln University, St. Paul's, Normal Institute in Virginia. And some of those schools may have already locked on to the homecoming tradition. And then in 1927, when we became the CIAA champions, we were pulling in even bigger crowds, and we started playing at the World War I Memorial Stadium. And there are older stories about how each homecoming seemed bigger than the next. So we were gradually becoming the greatest homecoming on earth through our football team, and then all the festivities that surrounded it, even 85, 90 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that's that moment where the Memorial Stadium opens up and I think becomes this place that that I guess was really the first official stadium, sort of that could actually seat people and feel like a crowd and a place for the games, right?
Yes, there are stories of the earlier days in the college. I contribute a monthly column to the alumni newsletter, the Alumni Times. The next edition, which will come out sometime next week, is actually the story of how we went from playing on the fields on campus to building our own stadium. But some of the older football games were played in Dudley Field. Those were our athletic grounds where the cafeteria and Holland Hall are today. So there were no seats. I think people would gather and just watch the football game. So it was a big deal to be able to play inside that stadium. But the World War I stadium was primarily built for baseball. So there were a lot of problems with having massive sellout crowds in the stadium. We had a lot of victories, a lot of great moments, but there weren't enough bathrooms in the stadium. And when it would rain, it would get a little too muddy for the track team. So virtually by the late 60s, the university knew we needed our own stadium. And eventually by 1981, we opened the Aggie Stadium, now the BB&T Aggie Stadium.
And that sort of big stadium is really going to make the football experience bigger, and probably also the homecoming experience bigger, right?
Yes, in fact, the stadium opened, the Aggie Stadium opened fall of '81, and by all accounts, the stadium was supposed to seat 17,000 people, but reportedly 23,000 people showed up to the football game. Uh, so it was a massive success from the beginning, and it's a beautiful stadium. It's had several renovations, including the $1 million scoreboard, and I know eventually the university will probably expand it even more or build an even larger athletic facility. But A&T football has always been a crowd drawing. Just there's so many stories about our homecoming uh, drawing record crowds. Even I'll show you this slide. This is 1936. I'm not doing full screen anymore because it'll just automatically flip on me. But uh, this is the oldest known image of an A&T homecoming. It's from the Chicago Defender, and I hope I'm not violating fair use by showing this clipping. But
I think we're
this is the parade in the World War I Stadium. The parade used to march from the World War I Stadium to Dudley Street near the Dudley building that used to be the administrative building. Even the caption below the picture said, "This drew 5,000 people. This is a record homecoming." Another newspaper said, "A&T is creating the most lavish homecomings ever seen on any HBCU campus." So our football team, the parade, the floats, all of it was coming together, and we were already getting this high reputation for being the greatest homecoming on earth 84 years ago.
Yeah, and I think the parade, I mean, let's talk some about the parade and the different kinds of uh, how that's grown into one of the signature events of the homecoming experience. 1936 here, people in all the way in Chicago are taking note of it. Is that
Mhm.
the earliest parade, or were there some before that?
Last year, I was asked by the Alumni Times to write an article on how the homecoming parade got started, and I thought it would be a tricky answer, just like when was the first homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out there was actually a clipping in our student newspaper, the A&T Register. So this is October 1934, and the article says that um, there is a plan for a parade, and a special attraction of the game will be the Alumni Parade. This is the beginning of the second paragraph. The first to be sponsored for the college for homecoming. And it's a very long article and it's fascinating. The goal of the parade was for at least one member of every previous graduating class to hold up the class banner with the class motto and march in the parade. And I wish we had photos of this. We probably just haven't found them yet. I'm really hoping that somebody was there with a home video camera
Mm-hmm.
and took some video footage of this. So this parade would have had somebody from the class of 1899, 1900, all the way down to 1934. And then the undergraduates would march after. And I still don't know if this parade was before or after the game, but that year we beat Lincoln University 13-0. So the parade, I believe, was very motivating, and it has been a staple ever since.
A cause for celebration, and it was fun to think about, like all the alumni walking in the parade, sort of
I
being part of the
know,
parade instead of sort of lining up to watch things like the band. And of course, we also have to talk about the blue and gold marching machine, right?
right?
And their role in the parade. So they're mentioned in even in these early parades. Um, can you, just for those of us who don't know it as much, how far back does the marching band go in A&T history?
What we call the marching band did begin in 1918 under Professor W.E. Liu, and they recently had their centennial in 2018. The college itself has had a band as far back as 1907, and we know that from photographs and archives. This is an image we recently digitized from the personal collection of Dr. B.W. Barnes. He was a dentist in Greensboro and taught bacteriology at A&T, and he was the class of 1909. So we have a lot of clippings from his personal scrapbook, but the oldest images of the band go back to 1912. There's even a mention of the band in the Greensboro Daily News. The band played during Greensboro Centennial in 1908, and they would play for emancipation programs it was a celebration, celebrate emancipation in the Black community that would take place every January 1st or 2nd. But the band has been a staple of homecoming. In fact, I say as far as musical performances, we've had Phyllis Hyman, we've had James Brown, but every year we've had the band, and we will continue to have the band. And we can see them here in 1936. Again, this is the 1939 yearbook. Maybe not this page, but the band has always been a staple of homecoming, and you can see them here. We have 1949, the dancing majorettes. We can see the uniforms, them making a formation on the field, but the band has always been a staple of homecoming.
Now, they're this sort of distinctive style and a lot of the moves and stuff we associate with the marching machine. That came a little bit later.
Yes. What happened was in the 1940s, one of our students, a man named Walter F. Carlson, he was a member of the B-1 Navy Band during World War II. And after the war, he got his master's degree at one of the northern colleges. I can't remember which one, but he learned a lot of the high stepping techniques from this university. So when he came back to A&T to become the band director, he incorporated a lot of the uniform style and the high stepping into the college band. So our college band grew in reputation for the way we perform and the way we play the music. And over the years, we've had several wonderful directors who have contributed to the style of the marching band. We've had Jimmy Williams, we've had Dr. Johnny B. Hodge. He was over the band, marching band and the symphony band. And we have all the way to the recent times. And I know the current director's name, but I could get one letter wrong and say the wrong name. But our reputation for the band has grown and grown. And I think we officially became the blue and gold marching machine in the late 1970s under Jimmy Williams and Dr. Hodge. And then for myself, being an older millennial, I could say how old I am. I'm not too ashamed of it, but I'll just say I was here when Hackley and Rennick were chancellor. That's what people do. If you don't want to say how old you are, you say my
right. You just give your range.
I was at A&T when the movie Drumline was out, and that movie starring Nick Cannon. It's very obvious that movie is based on A&T. But what happened was I noticed with a lot of people at A&T and a lot of people a lot of people I knew who were still in high school, it generated a lot of more buzz about the band. So it's just the legend has continued and continued to grow. But we've won so many championships, so many awards for our wonderful band. And we do have this legacy of outstanding performances, being very competitive and having a distinct style, beginning with Walter F. Carlson in the 1950s.
It's really that showmanship, right? I mean, and homecoming becomes this fantastic showcase. And
Yes.
Of course, music is this huge part of it, and not just the marching band, but you're bringing in these amazing performers from the worlds of entertainment. What are some of the sort of memorable concerts, or you were mentioning, I guess you've discovered the earliest musical performance associated with homecoming.
As part of a homecoming exhibit and that was in the library 2 years ago, I tried to put together a master list of performers, and it's going to take some time, but the earliest performance we could confirm, and we find this mentioned in several historically Black newspapers, but this is just one clipping. The group was called the Celery City Serenading Syncopathing Orchestra, or Smiling Billy Stewart and his Celery City Serenaders. They were a group out of Florida. In fact, a lot of papers back then would sometimes refer to Aggies as Tar Heelers just because we were the prominent football team from North Carolina. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of jested a little bit that we were having this tailgaters or alligator group from Florida coming to play. But I wish I knew the story of this. I think it took some time before guest performers really took on the life that they have. In the 40s and 50s, we seemed to attract more orchestras and swing bands, Buddy and Ella Johnson, Max Westerban and his orchestra. But by the late 60s, that's when we started pulling in the big names. Now, 1970, that is when we had James Brown, Godfather of Soul, in More Gym. A lot of people don't realize how big, significant More Gym was. We've had some of our most passionate, exciting moments in More. We have the much larger Corbett Sports Center, but in the 70s, we had the Delphonics, the Manhattans, and then in the 80s, we had Melba Moore. And then to the 90s, Phyllis Hyman. We've had Snoop Dogg, Common, Tupac, just so many performers. And eventually the concerts got too big to have on campus. By the time I came to A&T in 2004, the concerts were at the Greensboro Coliseum.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have had gospel concerts for the longest time. The gospel choir still performs, but we've had guest gospel singers. I missed an opportunity to see Ty Tribbett and GA God's Academy when I was a student, but he packed Harrison Auditorium. And the most recent gospel show in my memory of the guest, that is David and Tamela Mann, and that was too big to have on campus, so that also is at the Coliseum. So we've just had. I recommend to anyone our yearbooks online. If you want a serious throwback, look at the 70s yearbooks especially to see, because those are the first yearbooks fully in color, just about, and you could see all these wonderful singers and legends who came through and sang on the campus or in proximity of the campus.
Yeah, have you managed to dig up any recordings from Smiling Billy Stewart to kind of hear what it would have sounded like in the 1930s?
Oh man, that is a great idea, and I'd never
It's
thought
hard
of
to
that.
say whether they got, whether they recorded, because so many of the Chitlin Band circuits, they were performers, but they weren't necessarily getting recorded. But
That is a fantastic idea, because what I did was mostly focus on book research, but if there's a recording out there, I would love to hear it, and it would give a sense of what the entertainment was like 91 years ago.
And wouldn't it be something if somebody had a bootleg of James Brown in Moore Gymnasium in 1970, that would be what I wouldn't have given to me.
Nothing's
Able to hear
impossible,
some of
Glenn.
that.
Nothing's impossible. I look forward to all discoveries out there that are in people's garages and attics, or somebody might have it right now and thinking, "Oh, I didn't know y'all didn't have that." It's like, please donate it to us or give us a digital copy so we can save it for the future.
All right. Well, I am gonna bring in here. I've got my colleague Rodney Dawson is here, kind of working in the background, helping me out on this program. Rodney has had his own experience, a Moore Gym concert story from your early days, Rodney.
Yeah, before I was an official Aggie, I was unofficial. I grew up in High Point, and we would always sneak on campus and try to go to the homecoming festivities. And I remember when, after every home game, without fail, everybody would go across the street to what used to be Parker Brothers, was a restaurant.
Oh.
And they would hang out at Parker Brothers. Win, lose, or draw, the team could get beaten by 20, but it was always a massive crowd over there. So I got some stories for that. But I remember coming back in 1993, I actually pulled up the old flyer. And these names can elicit some controversy now, but it was Yo-Yo, MC Lyte, Ice Cube, and the now deceased Tupac.
Mm.
And the concert was, like you were talking about the numbers, the line, people tried to merge the lines. There was a spinoff line from the main line. And so folks tried to merge it, and A&T police thought that we were trying to bum rush the front door.
Oh.
Tupac this is at Corbett. Tupac was at the glass egging everybody on. Like, do it. To control it, the A&T police ended up pulling out some mace and sprayed it.
Mm.
And I felt my face burning. And I didn't know how bad it was till I heard two girls walk by, and they said, "Ooh, look at him." And I looked, and it was mucus coming. And so, but I still had a great time, still made it to the concert. But I'll share one other thing. After that, I went into radio, and I worked for Intercom, which was 97.1. And we had the Tom Joyner morning show, and they did the Tom Joyner Sky Show every Friday. And it was the biggest thing to try to get them to come to your location. So for 3 years, we would put in 3 different events to see if they would choose our location. So in 1998, we put in the Black Film Festival in Winston-Salem, the Aggie Eagle Classic, and then A&T's Homecoming. And we got the word back that finally we'd been selected, and they were coming to 1999. They were going to come to A&T's homecoming for this sky show. And this was the biggest thing I've ever done. We had so many media requests. I ended up having to get interns to do interviews with local news outlet, Essence Magazines, USA Today. We had to hire we had to hire a band. We hired the Gap Band to perform with Charlie Wilson. A&T took it a step further. The band marched into a War Memorial Auditorium playing one of their signature songs, Outstanding. And show you how A&T has grown, we had to look at different venues. And so we looked at Curry Convention Center, Harrison Auditorium. This was before, I think it renovated in 2006. So this would have been 99. It didn't have the infrastructure. It was too small, and it couldn't take the equipment and the amount of what we were going to bring into it. We ended up selling on War Memorial Auditorium. It seated at the time 2,200 people. The Sky Show was supposed to start Friday at 6 a.m. By Thursday night, that previous Thursday at 7 p.m., the first person was in line. We had over 10,000 people in line trying to get into an auditorium that only seated 2,100.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's my homecoming story.
Well, stick with us, Rodney, because I think, because James and I were also talking yesterday a little bit. You're from High Point, and you're growing up and outside of Greensboro, but still A&T homecoming is sort of part of this community experience, right? James, you were mentioning too that this idea that the homecoming is not just for the alumni, but really sort of sparks the whole neighborhood and the whole community, especially East Greensboro.
Yes, because I grew up in Winston-Salem, and I didn't really have a sense of A&T's homecoming until I actually didn't really appreciate it till after I graduated in 2008. And I've lived in Greensboro every year except a year and a half. But last year, my wife and I had a flood in our apartment at the same time as homecoming. So we were living in a hotel, and it was really the first homecoming where I wasn't completely on campus. Every homecoming I've come to, I was always, at the parade or at the fun, by War Memorial Stadium, the vendors, everything like that. So this year we were at breakfast at Waffle House on Wendover, and all the cooks and chefs are wearing T-shirts that say "I survived Jiho," and the Waffle House is packed with Aggies, and I was like, wow. And I think it was the first time that I got a sense of how much homecoming was treasured and how much it impacted the city of Greensboro. And I asked the manager if we could have one of those T-shirts for archives. We exchanged cards, and so I don't want to pack archives too much, but we could actually tell the story of homecoming just with T-shirts. A lot of people I know in the Bluford Library, they have their homecoming T-shirt from the 90s and the 80s, and it's just wonderful ways to tell that story. But moments like that just show you just how big and how much homecoming means to the community and to the city of Greensboro.
Yeah, Rodney, you feel like even, in High Point, that sort of sense of this being an important moment where people are coming together, and you probably got friends and family and folks in your community who are alums and who are involved.
Mm-hmm. I recently talked to an artist who talked about the artwork that emanated from the Cosby Show. The Cosby Show era. It sparked a lot of people to start purchasing some particularly African-American art. And what it did for African-Americans to want to go to school. My wife, who's a midwife, wanted to become a doctor at that time because she watched the Cosby Show, and then she later the spinoff A Different World. Before that, A&T homecoming did what the Cosby Show in A Different World did for the nation. For the people in the surrounding area that knew it, that was a college experience that made you say, one day I want to go to school and I want to be in the band, or I want to play football, or I want to be a student, or I want to be in the pep squad. I want to be a part of this atmosphere, a part of this culture. So it incentivized me to want to go to school. And so I think that's what it did for a lot of people in the surrounding area. And it wasn't until I got in the radio and saw the financial impact that it was bringing these millions of dollars, and sometimes one of the largest events in Greensboro. But people were hurt by it. When it didn't occur this past year, it hurt a lot of businesses because they were counting on that income and that influx of people to fill these hotels and go to these restaurants.
Yeah, I'm I'm sure that's definitely the case. James, I have a question here from another colleague, John Zachman, who wanted to know, besides the parade and the bands, some of the other traditions associated with the homecoming. In particular, we haven't really talked about the homecoming court and some of those traditions.
I'll start with one or two. Well, there's one that's maybe lost today. When homecoming first started in the mid-20s, there were three traditions: the big football game. There used to be an agricultural fair where ag students would show their, livestock research products. And in fact, back in those days, there were historically Black agricultural fairs throughout the state. But I'm not sure when the ag fair disappeared. The third tradition was a luncheon with the alumni with President Bluford. And I know that's still going on. It's just there are many, many more options for lunch today. So those are the first three traditions before the parade came around. But the homecoming court, Miss A&T has always been the queen of homecoming. In fact, I'm gonna share my screen again. In this, even in this, these early parades, based on description, the first car was always Miss A&T. And whenever you look at some of the old yearbooks, and I'm gonna stop sharing this and I'm going to share a yearbook page. I think I still have this up. Yeah, I'm gonna go to 1950. When you go through the old yearbooks and the old newspapers, Miss A&T, Miss ROTC, a lot of these titles have come and gone, but the court was always at the festive center of homecoming parades. This is one of my favorite yearbooks. Miss A&T, 1949-1950. This is Jessie Smith. Jessie Carney. Today, she's Jessie Carney Smith. She is the Dean of Libraries at Fisk University.
Oh, wow.
One of the greatest librarians in the country. But she was Miss A&T, 1949-1950, and she was also Miss Dudley High School before she came to A&T. So whenever you find Miss A&T in the yearbooks and in the surrounding pages, you get a sense of the court and the festivities. So let me go back just one page. I'm trying to find her court. I think for this yearbook, it was just a highlight of her. And I think it's the 1951 yearbook. We get a larger sense of the homecoming court. And I think even for a more festive example, I should show a yearbook from the 70s. Here we go. So the homecoming sweethearts, Miss Pam, Queen of 4-H Club, Miss Co-Ed, Miss Junior Class, Miss ROTC. So the homecoming court has always been huge. And we also have a video of the 1988 Miss A&T coronation. And it's like Miss Scott Hall B, Miss Scott Hall A. And it's just wonderful to see all these. In archives, we do have a massive Miss A&T collection. But I was thinking we need a Miss, we probably need one just for the homecoming court and all the different titles that existed over the years. Some have come and gone and some are still with us. And I'm just gonna show one more later example.
And for those of you who want to look up this resource, Digital North Carolina is a great repository of digitized things that many of us have used. I know you have a bunch of have sponsored the digitization of A&T yearbooks. There's a collection of Greensboro Senior High School, Dudley High School, a lot of local and actually statewide yearbooks and other digital resources. So if you want to go either do some serious research or even just some nostalgia tripping, it's really, really a fun thing to be able to flip through and find some amazing images.
We reference so many A&T researchers here, and sometimes there are always details that we overlook. This is one of my favorite yearbooks, 1971 yearbook. In this yearbook, our chancellor, Dr. Harold L. Martin, is a sophomore, and Dr. Rodney McNair, famous NASA astronaut, class 1971, his senior photo is in here. The 70 yearbooks are especially popular because in the 1970s, you start to see more Black pride taking place. So you have like more Afrocentric fashions, more afros, more type of non-Western type of fashions in the clothing. We even have drama majors ask us for pictures from these yearbooks that they could reference for plays and fashion. So there we go, Miss Senior, Miss Junior. Let me zoom out a little bit. There we go, Miss Groove Phi Groove, Miss Phi Beta Sigma, Miss Men's Council. So I think at one point, several of the organizations always had a representative for the Miss A&T Coronation Court, Miss Harrison Players, Miss Charmette, Miss Curriculum Development, Miss Administrative Helpers. And I could go on showing these. There are just so many of these ladies from over the years. And the tradition of a Mr. A&T did not actually begin until 1978. I had the privilege of meeting the first Mr. A&T, Mr. Carl Locust, and he gave his oral history for the library last year. And I think the tradition stopped for a few years, but Mr. A&T has come back and taken on new life over the past 12 or 15 years or so.
Well, that's great. Well, we're getting close to running out of time, but I do want you to share a little bit about that effort you started a couple years ago. You mentioned of taking adding like actually another sort of homecoming celebration at Bluford Library and collecting some stories and sharing some of these great memories about homecoming.
Well, this has to be my all-time favorite homecoming memory. 3 years ago, until 2018, the library had not prepared a homecoming event just yet. And I was talking with another librarian about a Black History Showcase for February, where we could show artifacts from archives related to regional and national Black history. We weren't able to do that in February, but the idea came up, what if we could turn the Bluford Library into a museum for one evening? And the basis for that became the A Antiques Roadshow. I don't know how the name came out of my brain. I love Antiques Roadshow, and I don't know if I mispronounced antique and it sounded like A&T, but it caught on. And the first year we did this, it was Antiques Roadshow Treasures from the F.D. Bluford Library Archives. And we had an exhibit and display in the first floor of the library. And I have one image of that celebration right here. So this is the first roadshow. We had nearly a dozen tables surrounding the staircase in the center of the library, plaques, photographs, magazines, that large picture of the A&T 4 that used to hang in the sit-ins. That was a dining area in the old Student Memorial Union. So it was a great way to bring back people's memories. We had blow-ups of old campus maps so people could get a better idea of what the campus used to look like and bring back those memories. And then last year for homecoming, we did the road show again, but we teamed up with one of the professors in the history department, Professor Yvonne Haith, a professor of oral history, and 4 or 5 of her students worked with us in the library to collect oral histories of alumni who visited the library. And we hope to have those oral histories online soon, but we were able to sit down and talk with Academy Award nominated filmmaker Kevin Wilson Jr., comedian Timothy Shropshire. Several of us in the library gave oral histories. So altogether, we collected 8 oral histories. And I had a talk recently with some of the librarians that we should continue to do this every year to gather as many stories and oral histories about homecoming experiences as possible in the future. Even this year, being all virtual, what is it like? How has COVID impacted your life? what do you miss the most about past homecomings? And that way, just like some of the examples I showed you, we have no record of the 1926 homecoming, but we can guarantee we have records of every homecoming going forward. Not just the flyers and the tickets and the pictures, but people's voices and opinions and their, real memories of their homecoming experiences.
I think that's an amazing project, and really a chance to sort of bring, so I'm sure you'd love people to share those memories with you, share any, photographs and footage, because it tells you about homecoming. It tells you about sort of the meaning, how people connect through homecoming, and it can tell us other things about the history of Greensboro as a city, in particular East Greensboro, where the archival record is, needs more sources whenever we can get them. So I want to say thanks to James and for sharing some wonderful memories, some wonderful facts about homecoming history. Thanks to Rodney for popping in, helping me out on the show, and also sharing your stories. We got a lot of great programs coming up for Greensboro History Museum. Indigenous North Carolina webinar series is wrapping up next week. Rodney, I guess you should sort of mention a little bit about that program. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, maybe I shouldn't host a webinar. Indian education in public schools. We're talking with Dr. Connie Locklear of Robeson County, and just looking to have an informational and wonderful and engaging time.
Yeah, it's been
at 6.
It's been a great series. The other webinars from the other 2 webinars from that series are available on the museum's YouTube channel. And next Friday, things are getting a little spooky here on History Lunch Break. I'm going to have a wonderful substitute for the host with Catherine Johns, and she's going to be talking with a few folks about some spooky stories from different parts of Greensboro. And we'll also be releasing some spooky tales from the cemetery with storyteller Cynthia Moore Brown, who usually comes and does a presentation here at the museum as part of our goulash festivities. This year we've captured her virtually, so she will be sharing some eerie tales from the First Presbyterian Church Cemetery via your Facebook page. So tune into that and check out greensborohistory.org for all of the information. Don't forget the museum is open to the public right now with our exhibition Pieces of Now, Murals, Masks, Community Stories, and Conversations. Admission is always free. Check out the website or our Facebook page for hours, and we will look forward to seeing you back here next Friday for History Lunch Break. Thanks again.